crack this now, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
Get juiced up.
Get a crack into it. All right. Hey, everybody. What's up? I'm Andrew Cannon. Today on Relatively Positive Things, we've got my good friend, Mirko Mangum. Now, Mirko, I got to start. I don't do intros normally, but I think this one's so much fun because of how we met and how long ago we met. So my first Phoenix Am, 2004, I was 17 years old, and I flew out here on a plane, had a hotel room, and it was just like, go to Phoenix Am, see how it goes. I showed up, and the hotel was like close to the park, but I didn't actually have any idea. I mean, it was kind of far, I think, in hindsight. And I got to the park, and you were one of the first people I met. And I don't know if you remember, 2004 was like kind of crazy inclement weather. There was like tons of, yeah, it was like the one rainy year. There was so much rain that it was crazy. And you were just like, Andrew, hop in, come on, come with me. And you full on just like took me around. We went and ate together, we hung out. And one of the reasons I was so excited, aside from the fact that you have such a cool and long career in skateboarding, was because over the 22 years that we've known each other, you have consistently been one of the most selfless people I have ever met. You have always been just like so down to help. You've never asked for anything in return. You have 100% just been a person in skateboarding and in my life that's just like, hey, how can I help? Hey, you need to talk and learn something? No problem. And even to this point now, where I'm 39 years old and we've talked about shoe brands and all kinds of skate industry stuff, it's like you have always been that same selfless individual. And so I was genuinely like, I cannot wait to hear what makes you tick.
Times are changing.
So, okay, let's start from the beginning. Where are you from and how did you get into skateboarding?
So I'm originally from Notz, Italy, born in 1979. It's the German-speaking part of northern Italy. My family, my older brother, mom, stepdad, and I immigrated to lovely US of A, United States of America, in 1979. We ended up living in East County, El Cajon, which is where I was introduced to the lovely art of skateboarding by a local hooligan named Robert Baker. Robert was Samoan dude, Mohawk, it's basically like a Samoan Muska back in like late 80s, like never had sleeves on, just wildin', be like always some form of music playing apparatus with him and always skating. And like we all played outside of the apartment where he lived. Whenever he went in, he'd leave his board out in front. So when he was in, everyone would take turns grabbing his board and skating, and that like started my love for like, what is this? 'Cause, you know, Robert would like come out, grab his board. It's almost like thrashing. Like he'd run, jump off the bumper of a car and like just be out. And then we'd be like, when's the magician coming home? So that's how I was introduced to skateboarding.
Do you remember what board it was that he had that you were skating for the first time or no?
I don't. It's kind of like in the kamikaze executioner era, like that is what became available to us. Like I can't remember what board he actually had, but I know he had like good trucks, because when we all ended up like getting these, like I think I got a Veriflex, like Voodoo, and someone else got an Executioner, like basically like generic boards. I remember he kind of like scoffed at them all, like, "Pah, you guys got, you know, the budget version." So I'd imagine like he had like an official, you know, I want to say he had like some kind of Sims, wheels, I don't know. You know, when you tend to remember something that you see later and you're like, was that it? Just the setup of that era, but I don't remember the specific board.
And what was it that at that time drew you to skating? Was it his personality? Was there any specific moment that you were just like, this is it, I love this?
You know, it was an interesting time because I grew up riding BMX, and that was like kind of our neighborhood's first love. Like I have an older brother and who's named Thomas who's great at everything. So he like got a bike for Christmas, and he was like doing tabletops off the same little speed bump that we skated. So everyone got bikes, and then from BMX, like some people started breaking, like pop-in B-boy stuff, and my brother was good at that. Strangely enough, like we took all the furniture out of our bedroom and just had tile, and like our apartment was like the room that everyone came to break in. So like that breaking kind of gave me an awareness of how your body parts move. So when I saw Robert skating, I was like, dude, he's like breaking on a boat. You know what I mean? It was almost as if he was like hauling ass. Like it looked like he was breakdancing on a board. And I was like, that looks incredible. Like, you know, I want to try it. And that, you know, then you get like, oh, power slide, and you get the feel of that, and you find out about bombing hills and ditches and quarter pipes and half pipes, and like it just opened up this world to like everything was skatable, right? Like everything you looked at, you're just like, oh, that bump, that crack, like, you know, you Chinese ollie a crack in the sidewalk, and that becomes a spot back then. You know, you skate a parking block for hours, you know, and then you finally make it to like someone puts a sheet of ply on a fence, and like you're just kick turning a Boeing sheet of ply, and then, you know, you find a pool and you see someone do a frontside grind and your mind is blown, you know, and then you see your first video. So I'm rambling.
No, but that's what this is about.
That's how I fell in love with skateboarding. It was like the endless options of like everything's skatable, and it was like a puzzle that could never be solved.
I love that. At what point did you go from casually skating in the neighborhood to getting sponsored and going down that road?
So right around that, the more often he left his board out front, I'd say after like a month, other kids in the neighborhood started getting boards. I didn't get my own board, like basically like a bunch of kids Frankensteined a board for me. So I got like a hand-me-down board. Like I think I had like a Thunder hanger on whatever base plate, like 4 different wheels. Like that was my first board that basically like everyone gave me their spare parts. And like from the time I got that, I was like, I'm gonna skate every day. And you know, outside of going to baseball practice at the time, I still played baseball then. So I was like 12-ish, 12, 13. Every day I skated. Like if I wasn't at school, like, you know, and it was at that point of skating where it felt like every day you made up a trick. Like if you did a power slide 180 and 180'd out, you're like, I just made up a half cab, you know, and it was like discovery. Everything felt new and exciting. So yeah, I got like pretty deep into it pretty quick. You know, someone brought a magazine around, and, you know, back then, like, you only had one magazine, so you read like the print on everything. And I had seen a Going ad, and in the bottom it said like, whatever, Pioneer Way, El Cajon. And I was like, El Cajon? Like, you know, broke out a map, looked at it, I was like, oh, this is like 5 miles away. So in some strange, in my head, I was like, if I go there, there's gonna be stuff to skate there. So I was like, skated there, nothing to skate there, but I went around the back like we always do, like check for curbs, and there's a trash can, and in the trash can on the floor there was like just bolts and, you know, like washers, more washers than anything. So of course I opened the trash can, I was like, oh shit, there's like bushings, and they were like just blemishes and defects, and there was like some broken hangers. And, you know, at that time, like I didn't have access to like kingpins, and like everyone was breaking kingpins. So I took all the broken components, I took them home. I was like, oh, we could pound the kingpin out of this. And someone's like, oh, you have a broken hanger, you can take it back and they'll give you a new one. So I was like, what? So skate over there during business hours. I walk in, I was like, oh, I got a broken truck. And there's like a nice old lady who's like, just goes into the drawer and pulls out a new one and gives it to me. And I was like, and then I see she takes the broken one and just throws it in the trash. And I was like, ding! At some point, that truck's gonna go back in the trash can again. So I made a habit of going there to check the trash often. And then the team manager one day was out back and he's like, dude, what are you always doing back here? And at the time, like it was the jump ramp era in skating. I maybe was already kind of getting good at this point, and the TMs and marketing guys were always at like demos and events like going on in town. And he's like, I see you everywhere. Like, I know you're a street skater. Like, we have all these sponsor me videos from all these street guys. And he's like, why don't you come in the office and watch them and make a stack of the good ones for us? Like, we never skate street. Like, we only watch the vert videos. So that was like kind of my introduction. And then eventually, like, I got sponsored by a local shop. And then I started getting Goldwing trucks, and that kind of started the whole introduction to being sponsored.
So they kind of had you come in and sort through the sponsor me videos that they were having. How old were you at this time?
I'd be like 13 or 14, like maybe 15 max.
So you got it was like your pre-screening to be a team manager
Yeah,
at the ripe age of 13, 14.
Those videos were vicious. Like the skate, it was almost as if like, we're gonna send you the gnarliest videos. Like people are sending in like, sponsor me videos, snuff film. Like just like, at that point, like maybe I was like a pretty innocent kid, but I was just like traumatized that some of the stuff that people would send in. I'd be like, oh my God, I just saw someone die on a video, is it real? And anyways, yeah, so it was vicious back then. Definitely built a little character.
That sounds insane. So you're getting some stuff from Goldwing, you're sponsored by Goldwing, you're sponsored by a shop, right? Mm-hmm. And then what point did you go from like getting some flow to, okay, I'm on the team for these brands?
So back then in San Diego, there was like a ton of castle contests. So at some point, someone in the neighborhood's like, let's go to a castle contest. Actually, there was a shop called Just Boards in Ocean Beach, and they had a demo. And this is like in the jump ramp era. Funny enough, I met Oscar Jordan and Kent Russell at this same demo. And at that demo, someone from Castle was there. So they're basically at the end of the demo, they're like, come to the Castle contest next week. I think I ended up doing all right there. Someone that worked with Stedham was there. And they're like, Stedham's leaving, or he had left Powell and he's doing his own thing. So that was like the first official like flow board I got. And like at the time, Team Stedham was gnarly. It was like Jason Rogers that ended up being on 8th Street. Who else was on it? Like pretty heavy squad. Anyways, those guys ended up getting officially on the team. I didn't make it to the official flow team, which funny now because years later in a TM role, you know, you realize like what felt so traumatic at the time where I was like, man, this sucks. Am I not good enough? Should I quit skating? Like all this self-doubt. Later in life, I realized I went through that experience to know what other people, like basically how do you let people down easy, but also like continue to encourage them and let them know that it's not always directly like you're not getting on the team, not because you're not good. It's just there's too many people. We have 9 people in the city you live in. If you moved to Kalamazoo, you'd be the #1 AM in that city. Just in San Diego, we have too many people. So it helped me understand that there's more reasons beyond skating to why people do or don't get on a team. So
that's something that people never talk about though, is like how important it is to understand that, hey, it may not necessarily be you specifically at home, and having that experience and being able to like port that over into all of the roles that you had over time is like such an important and valuable lesson.
Yeah, traumatic at the time, but later in life, I was like, you know, once you get into your 40s and 50s and you get to reflect on life experiences and how you felt at a particular time, where I was like, man, I know why I went through that. Like, and this is how many great conversations I've had because of that, experience that felt like the end of the world at the time. So in El Cajon, there's also a bunch of guys that worked for Zorlak. Zorlak was just 10 miles away. So outside of those guys flowing kind of, those guys were always getting new boards. It seemed like every week. So one guy in particular, Damon Mills, used to always give me his old Todd Prince boards. So I rode like the wackiest Zorlak shapes forever. Still have a little soft spot in my heart for Zorlak. Deadbolt trucks, like zombie wheels, like that whole distribution center, which as a kid, you have no idea that all that stuff's under one roof. And you're just like, these guys come home with a lot of stuff and a lot of stickers. And then there's another local pro named Jimmy Acosta that rode for Z. And he was like our version of a soy. He was like the El Cajon Mexican version of a soy. So he would go to Venice, skate with all the Z boys. Yeah, he was a Z boy. And then come home and like whatever people were doing in Venice at the quarter pipes, like he would basically replicate. So our entire town would be like, when Jimmy comes back, he's got new tricks and stories. And the team manager for Z used to come in town. And then that was like my first official, like, you're actually on the team, get an ad. So I had a Z roller as third generation Z boy, which I'm very proud of. Epic, like, as like a dream come true. When I would get out of high school, Jimmy worked at his father's meat market called Benny's Meats. So he had to be there every day at 3. So when I got out of high school, there's like 5 Main Street in El Cajon. There's like 5 curb cuts that are like jump ramps. So I knew he'd be coming down the street, and I'd be walking home and just watch whatever tricks he did on the curb cuts every day. And then I'd like go home and like try and like get my Jimmy on, mimic Jimmy. But Jimmy was like a great mentor. And like right around the same time, Bobby G skate camps were in San Diego, which was like kind of what Woodward is now. You basically sign up and you go for a week, and they bring in local pros or visiting pros, and you just skate all day. Like, weird concept. So I'd go there with Jimmy, and like it became a thing. Like a bunch of us skate rats would all get. He had a like 73 huge Impala, and it could hold like 50 people in it, and we'd all go to the camp. And then Chernansky would be at the camp filming a lot. And the same time, there's a castle contest like every weekend. So I'd see Chernansky all the time. And Z, everyone that worked at Z was great, but riding the rollers, you had to ride Z rollers if you rode for the team. And that was it was tough. They actually turned great, but just they were heavy and they rattled. And like, looking back on it now, you realize like when you're not really getting free stuff, that even the worst of trucks, if they're free, you're kind of like, man, this is going to help me realize my dream. I'm going to ride them, And I guess I got to a point in skating to where Chernansky was like, hey, I see you at the contest. I randomly get a call at home one day, and it's Chernansky, and he's like, what do you want to do in skating? And we end up having a conversation, and he's like, this is kind of what's going on under the umbrella that they created. So there's like, I think Fun was starting, Planet Earth was starting, 8th Street was already going, but they had so many people on the roster. We ended up talking about Planet Earth, and I skated with Miller a couple times, and actually was just skating the blockhead ramp with him maybe 2 or 3 days before the call came in. I was like, man, I'd love to ride for Planet Earth. And he's like, oh, I'll hook you up with Chris. So I ended up like going to meet up with Chris and having lunch, and ended up getting on the team. So that was like, I ended up leaving Z, which was heartbreaking because George Wilson, the team manager, was like, a second dad. He's like 70s era pro, moved from Florida to Venice, like just Florida Z boy. Like that whole Venice culture was interesting, pretty rough. I don't want to tell his life story, but he'd always be like, when you wear this shirt, you wear it with pride. And when you show up, like, you represent the brand, and everyone that works for the brand, and everyone that's come before you, and so it was a real prideful thing for me to be part of Z, and honoring that Jimmy got me hooked up. So it was hard to leave, but at the same time, Z was like struggling. Like later you come to realize like it's a couple people working there. They're trying to honor the past, but transition into the future and the trucks and everything. I was like, man, I'd love to ride the trucks. I really want that, and be on planet Earth and be a part of that. And that's why I ended up going to PE. And, Miller, obviously, awesome individual. So I went from, a solid camp to another solid camp. So yeah, I ended up riding for planet Earth, turning pro. I always said retired physically, not financially, at like the ripe age of like 23, 24. Back then you'd film something and you'd be like, I got another 6 months of being pro. Like, it felt like such a wheel, like progression was like such a big thing that you didn't go film stuff to, in my perspective, it wasn't you were filming stuff to do what you did the best. You were filming, like trying to do MBDs. Like, and as sloppy as that era might have been, that was your goal, to like film something that no one else had done. And in hindsight, if I knew people would be watching it 10, 20 years later, you're almost like, I'm embarrassed that anyone, you know what I mean? Like I would have taken much more time to film something that was reflective of how you skated at the time. But
You live, you learn.
yeah.
So you physically retire.
Yeah.
And that's when you get your foot into the door with working in the industry.
Yeah. Just prior to retiring, I lived in El Cajon, and Planet Earth was in Carlsbad.
For anybody that's not familiar with California, how far is that?
It's like an hour drive. It's kind of like LA traffic. Could be an hour, could be two. So I drive to Planet Earth, and right around the same time, Felix had just moved from Miami. So Felix came out with a guy named Gamez, and Gamez filmed, and he's a great skater himself and surf. Anyways, there was like a Cuban posse, basically, we called the apartment that they all lived in. So I was always coming up and like going on filming trips with Felix, and I'd be in the office and like waiting for everyone to get off work. And one day Chris was like, "Oh, come pick up boards with me." So got in at the time he had a Westphalia little VW bus, and we drove up to PS. And on the way up, he's like, "What do you do all day?" And at the time I was like, "Oh shit!" It's like having a conversation with a teacher. He's like, "Run me through your day." I was like, "Oh, I get up at 10." It basically equated to I didn't do anything till 3 o'clock, till everyone got off school or work or whatever. And then I'd meet up with the crew, they'd get something to eat, then we'd go skate, we'd get kicked out of a spot. Half the people would go to a second spot, half the people would go to the bar. So he's like, basically you're a pro skater that skates for an hour a day. And I was like, well, on paper, it looks like it. So he's like, why don't you start working at Planet Earth? We need help. And at the time, Planet Earth ended up breaking off from 8th Street, and Chris Miller basically started Earth Distribution. So Planet Earth was on its own now. So I started working at Planet Earth basically from like 9 to 3 every day. And then that was kind of the jump off point for the team or whoever was in town. So I'd still like work all day and then go skate and film. And I had like a couple injuries right around this time, like jacked up my back, and like I'd never let anything heal like most of us do. Like you get an energy. Like I rolled my ankle one time, and it never got better. Like I never can basically kick flip again. And that's half the reason I only did heel flips, because basically the tendon in my ankle, like once it got to a certain flick point, like there would be so much pain. Anyways, never let anything healed. And right around that time, like my back hurt, my knees hurt, my ankle hurt. And we went filming one day, and Shani and Richard Angelides were in the van with us. It's like right when Rhythm started, and we went to a school in long story short, there's a big bank, and I was trying something for like 20 minutes while these guys were setting up Shanny and Richard set up their board, trying 2 tricks. Didn't get in the 20 minutes, and these guys had just set up their boards, and like one of them was like a switch backside heel. Like Richard basically did it as his warm-up trick, and the other trick I was trying, Shanny did it in like two tries. I went to the office next day, and I was just like, I'm done. Like, give my money to these kids, like, you know, because I was also at that time aware like there's limited budgets and limited space, and I was like, it's such a finite resource to be able to be a sponsored am or a pro skater. I was like, I'm clearly not going to film the best video part. Like, I had no desire to do more contests at the time. I was like, let me pass the torch. And then from then on, I just started working almost full time, like every day. And that would be like picking up fabric some days, doing sales. We had screen printing in the back, so sometimes I would actually sell a t-shirt to the shop, go in the back, screen print it, and then the next day ship it. So there was like a time of Planet Earth where if you got like a 2-tone PE shirt, I probably sold it to the shop, printed it, and shipped it. So it was a pretty cool time to be part of an emerging business like that.
So you just learned a ton of stuff
Oh,
through
yeah.
your time at Planet Earth.
Yes, 7 years was like getting your master's and being an entrepreneur. Good, bad, or indifferent, right? It's like the blessing of being able to be like, oh, people are selling blind jeans, we'll make Planet Earth jeans, you know, and having the resources to go out and get materials and kind of figure it out on the job was pretty cool. But you also made a lot of mistakes, and then you're like, oh, there's experts at this, like production people, development people, people make patterns, people do shrink tests, people, you know, make certain fabrics to fit and shrink a certain way, and you know, so the bigger Earth got, the more resources and the better the people that came in. So it went from like, you know, opening the warehouse door and like looking in, like, we need a new employee who's in the warehouse, and it's like, Mark, come in, you're the new international sales director, right? As like the business grew, is like, oh, we're actually going to hire someone with international sales experience, you know, that actually knows about, you know, fluctuating currencies and, you know, why the all the things
that comes with the
that
roles.
comes right. Where before international business was like, how do we get rid of this product? Sell it to Poland. They've never seen it. It's, you know.
So you're mid-20s though, and you're learning these lessons that take people years and years. And I mean, one of those big lessons is knowing what you don't know, and then finding people that can do that job for you really well. Then after Planet Earth, you took all of those lessons, and that's when Alphanumeric started?
Yeah. So Alpha was an interesting one because right around the early 2000s, there's a bunch of people that, you know, DC was just getting started. So strangely enough, Planet Earth was in Carlsbad, but one parking lot down was that Drawer? 8 Ball first. So before Dub and Drawers in DC, there was 8 Ball. So it's Ken and Damon were one parking lot down. In that same parking lot was Andy Howell doing, I believe, Zero Sophisto at the time. And he also did another brand before Element or right around the same time. So it's Andy Howell, let's just say Zero Sophisto, and the early stages of Underworld Element were right there. So you had Airwalk, another block down the street. So we had like such a little microcosm of brands there. So people creating, you know, the landscape of skate culture, right? In that, and McGill's skate park was on the other side of Palomar Airport Road. So, sorry, lost track.
No, so it was like very, very close though in proximity, all these different companies, and then Alphanumeric started, right?
Yeah, so that's where we're getting. Alyasha and Omar, two of the co-founders in Alphanumeric, both all worked at Dub Drawers, or what became that whole umbrella. So we'd always see each other, and I'd met Alyosha skating in New York years before. Always thought he was a cool dude. And everyone kind of went out and skated and drank and socialized at the same places. We'd all run into each other like, oh, what are you guys working on? And Akko and Atiba had just moved into town as well. Somehow we all ended up getting together to talk about doing a video project and photo book. And we had like 3 coffees, like, let's all get together. And through that, we're like, man, everyone wanted to do creative things at their work that didn't really fit the aesthetic of the building, if that made sense. So Alyosha was like, man, I have these guys, this distribution company called International News in Seattle that did Mecca. Mecca was like urban apparel brand that was huge in the late 80s, early 90s. It was like the equivalent of what FUBU became before FUBU. So they had the infrastructure, like they had they had a production office in Hong Kong, and they were an official garment. And Alyosha had done some work for International News in Mecca, and I think he's the president at the time, a gentleman named Mike Olesko. He was Ollie's contact there, and he had told Ollie, hey, if you ever want to do a brand, come do it with us over here at International News. So one of the coffee talks, Ollie was like, yo, I got this opportunity to do a brand. Do you guys want to do it? So the name Alphanumeric came about. Unfortunately, right as like all the contracts were kind of, salaries and all that talk happened, everyone kind of agreed to like quit their jobs, and all the salaries were in place. Mike passed from a heart attack right at the same time. So everyone I hadn't quit Planet Earth yet, but everyone else quit, like DC and everything else that they were working on. And it was like, oh shit, what do we do? And the people at International News, Mike's partner, was like, hey, in honor of Mike, I'm going to honor all, everything that was on the table, and we're going to do Alphanumeric. So that's kind of how Alphanumeric was born. I ended up leaving Planet Earth, going to do that. That was a wild ride, right? Because now you go from this like really tight run Planet Earth skate company to the urban apparel business, which we're going to trade shows and Magic, and at ASR we're doing like a 20 by 20 booth, and you go to Magic and you have people with $5 million booths that are like 2 stories and 2 city blocks, and they're doing $50 million worth of business over the course of a weekend. So it was such a shift in cultures for me personally, from like this small world of ASR to this massive world of fashion. So you have celebrities running through the aisles, the who's who of hip hop and culture, and people with entourages, and I was like, wow, that's very eye-opening, and that was my first introduction to the urban chain distribution of business outside of skateboarding, right? Because up until then, like I was just, the only magazines I read were like skateboard magazines. The only videos I watched outside of MTV and music videos were skate related. Now my eyes were open to, fashion, just opened my eyes to, culture outside of skateboarding.
What was your specific role over at Alphanumeric?
I think I was VP of sales. So it went from at the time I left Earth was actually bought by K2. So K2, Chris sold Earth to K2. K2 basically came in, injected cash, which in hindsight, right at the time, rollerblading, K2 was mainly known as a rollerblade company, although K2 was an umbrella company, so they own like Coleman stoves, K2 rollerblades, skis, snowboarding, which is funny because the higher brass, like the CEOs of like the brain power of K2 would be in our office often, right? But I was so emotionally tied up in, we got bought by a rollerblade company that I couldn't move past it, right? Because I was in a place in my life, like early 20s, like I felt that planet Earth was part of my identity, right? So when I was at the skate park and people were like, you guys got bought by a rollerblade company, that's so corny. I felt like I personally had to answer to and for that, although I had no input on the decision. But being a young man, and I wouldn't say I was insecure, but I was definitely sensitive to it, that was part of my reasoning for leaving. But in hindsight, had I stayed and learned from all the brain power that bought us, because for years later, I didn't go to school. So everywhere that I worked, I always wanted to learn something from the people or the process or the surrounding. Like when I went to Alpha, I was like, let me see how a skateboard company outside, or how a company outside of skateboarding operates, because all I knew was Planet Earth, which, you know, Chris started. And at the time, you don't know, like people are taking out second mortgages on their houses and doing all this crazy stuff to meet payroll. And you have me as a sales, marketing, or just an employee, I had no visibility to that. You know, I'm still friends with Chris to this day, and you know, still consider him a friend and mentor. And like getting to go back and talk to him on my business journey and asking him about like, what were you going through at this time? And understanding the dynamics of what he was really going through, I was like, had no idea, right? Like the stresses of starting a business, trying to keep multiple teams, team riders happy, you know, having 2 kids, still trying to compete on tour and be a pro skater. No idea. Much respect to Chris Miller. But I was like, there has to be more to running a business than just this core skate company, like, you know, buy a board, sell a board, buy a shirt, sell a shirt. You know what I mean? It was always a grind, and it always felt like there was never a finish line. Does that make sense? Like the race never ended. It's like if you got rid of your spring goods, you were getting summer. And you know, then we started doing outerwear and you did winter. So getting outside of core, you know, what we call core skate, and getting into alphanumeric, that was my introduction to bigger business, bigger in quotes, because it ends up becoming the same thing, similar process, right? It's like you create a sample, salesman shows it, salesman sells it, you make it, it's just on a bigger scale, right? Instead of the core skate shop, now you're dealing with a Macy's or whatever the distribution channels were. So that was my role, just specifically sales at the time, VP of sales, and hiring a sales team.
How long did the alphanumeric journey last? Because was it relatively quick that you then moved on?
It was quick. So at the same time, my mom was battling cancer. Like there was just a lot of stuff internally going on with Alpha, and the people were like, basically I was just trying to focus on like basically, you know, my mom coming to the end of her time on earth, like the struggles of starting a new business with a new partner and the dynamics of all that. And I was just like, I got to tap out. So I ended up leaving Alpha, kind of dealing with all my family stuff. I intended on taking some time off, and then I was like, you kind of get to a place where you're like, I'm not a good griever, so let me get back to work. And at the time, my roommate was a guy named Nico, who also grew up in El Cajon, Nico Photography. It's been around forever and been a big part of my skateboard journey. He and I moved out of El Cajon to Solana Beach, which is halfway in between El Cajon and Carlsbad, Solana Beach. Del Mar, we lived a block from where the Del Mar skate park was. He worked at 4-Star Distribution, which was special blend snowboard apparel, Foursquare, and Forum snowboards. And Nico's been involved in skating. Like he worked at 8th Street. He helped start Evil. He did Evil Footwear. He was creative director at Dub, the snowboard magazine. Was it called Dub? Scratch that. I can't remember what the magazine was. What was the Big Brother version of snowboard?
I know it, but I can't put a name on it right now.
But anyways, Nico and I lived together, and then obviously he was well aware of what I was going through, and we're just having a talk, and he's like, hey, we're gonna start a skate footwear brand. Raul, the owner of 4-Star, wants to do a skate footwear brand, and these are the guys we kind of are thinking of, and the guys were like Muska, Jamie. He's like, do you want to work on it? And we ended up having a couple meetings. Like, we got Jamie and Muska, everyone together, and I'd already known Jamie for years from skating, and prior to leaving Earth, audio had started, which I didn't even mention that. So in the early days of audio, I was the guy that dropped off the samples to Jamie and Tony and everyone else. So Jamie and I kind of already worked on that together. So when the Circa opportunity came up, I ended up taking it. So I became the VP of sales and marketing of the building, so the snow brands included, but with a focus on building the Circa team. So I had known Appleyard from the audio days, and Appleyard also rode for Alpha. So Appleyard ended up coming over to Circa. So it ended up being like Jamie, Muska, Appleyard, Adrian Lopez, Cole Cannon, Rattray, which the Rattray story is an awesome one. He was like the hardest guy ever to track down. Side story.
Was that like Blueprint days?
That's Blueprint days.
He was like in Aberdeen, right?
Yeah, awesome story. So I was in London visiting our distributor, and I met Foz on the same trip. So I'm in the office, and someone had called, and I'm sitting in the office with Foz and someone else, and someone said something about Rattray. And I was like trying to find Rattray for weeks at this part. And I was like, what? Someone say Rattray? And they're like, yeah, he's gonna be at a shop tomorrow in Glasgow or whatever. And I got a ticket, flew there, and ended up meeting him there to offer him a spot on the team. Like, these guys want you on the team, would you be interested? So not only did I find him, but that night I went to a heavy metal karaoke bar, which could have been one of the best nights out I've ever had. So two great things. I ended up meeting Rattray, and he obviously joined, and Rattray is like probably one of my favorite people to just be with skating, and like obviously conversation's always great. He's a great mind, great thinker and philosopher, good guy to travel with.
So you fully helped build out the Circa team. Yeah. And I think this was a time where it wasn't like, hey, just slide in their DMs. Like, you're literally talking about, yeah. I'd been trying to find him for weeks, heard he was going to be at a shop, flew to a shop, and met up with him to get him on the team.
Yeah, it was like people didn't answer emails. Like, long distance phone calling was still like, I mean, we're still faxing people at the time. So yeah, no sliding into anyone's DMs. And I kind of prided myself on like, if someone put a hit list, like I was going to find that person. Like, so it was a well worth adventure. And the cool thing was also meeting Foz on that trip. So Foz worked at Slam. We got to know each other, and like I call Foz like my spirit skate animal. Years later, he ended up coming to the States, and I was working at Zero at the time, and like at that time, like skating was kind of mission based. If I was on a mission, it was like we were getting a generator, like something was getting lit up, like it was like business. So when Foz came to town, we skated this crappy little skate park in Leucadia. It's still there. It's like a little dish with like just 3 stair and a 2-foot. And like just watching him skate and the joy of skating that, and like just someone being in California. And I ended up like renting a van and like just taking Foz around just parks, because I was like, this is actually fun skate. Not that I wasn't having fun on other missions, but this was like skating for the joy of skating. So, you know, the fact that we're still friends years later, and, you know, I think half the heroin guys ride for Opus as well, is cool that that's the roots of our relationship came from, you know, the Circa days. So
these were Circa days, and you're already doing kind of zero style missions at that point, generator, lights, the whole nine, right? How do you make that transition? Because the next part of your journey was Blackbox, but how long were you over at Circa?
So I want to say 2.5, 3, that whole time, like, so my time at Circa was, there'd be, I think one of the years I was on the road, I want to say 260, 300 days out of the year. So I would like go visit each one of our international distributors in person, because again, like, I was a fan of boots on the ground, and like doing international business was so fresh for a lot of these guys. A lot of these international guys at the time were just people that skated, didn't really have a background in business. They'd come to the States maybe sometime for a contest, met some pros, and then was like, how do we bring skateboarding to Germany, for example, right? So they would buy boards from their friends at whatever brands, carry them back to Germany and open a shop. And then later they're like, oh, there's 10 people that want to open shops. So we're going to take 10 more trips to the States and buy stuff. And that's how a lot of those guys became distributors. But as the shoe business came along, you, one, needed to pre-book, you needed to land containers. So I would go visit all the distributors to kind of share best practices, right? Like, this is how you land a container. These are duties. These are all things we need to consider when bringing shoes into a particular country. This is how we run it in the US. Like, we get a sample, get a salesperson, they take orders, we give a deadline date, you know, and kind of establish the selling patterns for an actual distribution business. So I would go not only to teach, but also to learn, because some of the guys were actually really good at business and taught us a lot, or taught me a lot, that I can then share with other distributors in other parts of the world, and even sometimes bring those practices back to HQ. So it's pretty cool to like go out and learn like what V7's doing in France, or, you know, what Titus or, you know, 24/7 distribution's doing in Germany, and how different it is from Belgium, and how, you know, Marcus in Austria is, although it's a neighboring country, different animal, you know. So it was cool to get out and about. So I'd say it's like 2 or 3 years. And then during that same time, we had done video radio with Transworld, which was that big Euro tour. And like, I probably saw Jamie once a week, twice a week. And, you know, as Zero was growing, I wouldn't say it was becoming a burden at Tamieto. It was maybe outgrowing Tamieto, and Jamie wanted to do more with it. Then I think Tamieto had maybe the infrastructure, and by that, maybe he wanted to do more apparel, and they weren't set up to do it. Anyways, Jamie was like, I'd love to control more of what and how Zero turns up outside of Tamieto. So Jamie was like, I'm gonna buy Zero back from Todd, my shares, and I'm gonna start Blackbox. So when Jamie started Blackbox, I ended up leaving 4-Star Distribution to help him start Blackbox. So when Blackbox started, Jamie just got the international distribution from Tamieto. So I managed all the Zero international business. And the idea was like, we'd get our feet wet, you know, instead of taking this massive brand on and shit in the bed and not being able to manage the business, we would take it in pieces, build the infrastructure, you know, make sure we could deliver product, accounting, all that other stuff. So because I had visited all the distributors, a lot of the Circa distributors also did Zero, or we were already familiar with how they worked, and we plugged a lot of what we did for Circa into Zero. So started making deliveries, and that basically helped us double the Zero international business. So we were able to bring all of Zero into Blackbox basically twice as fast as we had originally had planned. So that was my role at Blackbox. I did everything. Like, I could get a call from Jamie at 2 a.m. and be like, I'm on a mission to go shoot this photo. And, Chad Wiggins and I would be like, all right, tickets, call whoever's in town, get the, you know what I mean? Like, dude, we had like 007 style. Like, he would call and we'd be like, all right, everything's set. Here's your tickets. Like, go skate. All your people are there, all the tools, everything. He obviously was like, at that time, this like dying to live time, like, come back, like, get the clip, edit, be in the office all day, play a couple games of skate, 2 days later, be on another mission. Like, Jamie was gnarly at the time. So he created like the infrastructure in Blackbox to, like, he got all the best people, production people, Dave Lively, like creative directing, Wiggins, like Michelle doing accounting. Like, Blackbox was like tough at the time. Like, he ended up getting a factory in Mexico, which, at the time there was always production issues with not being able to get enough boards because like Zero was so massive at the time. Like, solved that problem, and like 2 years later I was kind of like, he was gonna start falling. I was like, we got Zero as good as he wants to get it, right? Because he only wanted Jamie only wanted to do a certain amount of product. Like, everything he did wanted to be thought out, curated, and like, he wasn't just making shit to make it. Like, there was a reason for it, and I respected that, but also I was like, man, I want to do more. Like, I have all these other experiences. What can I go out and do? And right around that same time, a bunch of the OG Alpha guys moved back to New York, and Mark Echo had bought Zoo York at the time. So I get a call from Omar, who's one of the founders of Alpha in America originally. He's like, yo, I'm about to be the creative director at Zoo York. And like, I always told him, like, man, I'd love to live in New York. Like, that crazy Brooklyn contest back in the day, the one that was like chaos, like rat getting killed in the street and people getting beat up and D-Nice walking through. Have you ever seen that? Famous, oh, there's like a famous Brooklyn Banks contest where like the banks were at the like tipping point of anarchy. Like, I'll send you a video one day. There's like a city bus that comes through. It's like brand new white city bus, and there's a full skate demo. Someone's board shoots into the street, so the bus stops. And by the time that person walks out to pick up their board, like, everyone had like markered up the bus, and it looked like just a bus that had been running the streets of New York for like 10 years in seconds. And like, growing up in San Diego, like, I'd never seen any kind of chaos like that. And I was like, how do I live here? Like, how do I get to New York? And like, skating in the city was like, there's something about just rolling in the streets of New York. You don't even have to touch a spot. Like, just something about the makeup of the asphalt and the streets. Oh, it's magical. And then obviously, like, you might see the Gons, like the Loch Ness Monster. And like, there was just an aura around New York. So when he was like, do you want to move to New York? I was like, hell yeah. I've been waiting for this for, I guess 15 years at that point. So I ended up moving to New York to work at Zoo York after Echo bought it. And
that was, I mean, you had quite a stint over at Zoo York. You were there 2004 to 2009. And I mean, obviously your role has continuously changed. What was it when you got over to Zoo York? What did it end up being in the long run? And how did things end at Blackbox? Was it just like, it was like, hey, this opportunity's there, and you were like, all right, Zero's.
Yeah, that was another emotionally tough one, because Jamie and I were pretty tight. Blackbox was like an intimate working environment, and I think there's like only maybe 20 people at this point. So it was like, I loved everyone that worked there. Yeah, I just went to Jamie and was like, yo, I know you're going to do fall in over here, and there's limitations to what you can and want to do in this building, and like I still want to grow and explore, and I kind of want to own something myself, or do something that, not that I have creative control, but a little more say in like maybe the distribution or the products, because from the alpha days to Planet Earth audio, like Planet Earth started outerwear back then, and we were snowboarding a lot, and we were surfing, and we were skating, and then being at the 4-star camp, like I'd go on forum snowboard trips like every year. It's basically in the summer you'd go on Circa tours, and then in the winter you would go on snowboard video tours. So you'd go visit all the snowboard distributors, which most of them skated too. But all this life experience, I was like, man, just doing a sole skateboard company that's operating at its prime, I was like, I want to do more. And the idea behind Zoo York at the time was basically like make like if alphanumeric met Quicksilver, from aesthetics to a product assortment. So we could do Zoo York outerwear, we could do streetwear, we could do boots, we could do skateboards, we can kind of do more than just pure skateboarding. So the sell-in originally was like Omar has creative control of like who works there, kind of what branding, because anytime you have, what we learned at Alpha, anytime you have a apparel company involved, they're looking at like, why don't you sell to Macy's? Why don't you sell to these other people we already do business with? And the brands in those stores don't always align in terms of product mixes. And on paper, it looks like, yeah, these guys buy $10 million worth of Echo. Of course, it makes sense for them to buy Zoo York, but from a cultural or who's shopping that store didn't always fit. So the idea when we went to Zoo was Omar would have creative control and say in distribution. That's how it got pitched to me. So I was like, yeah, sounds great. When we ended up getting in there, it was a little different, right? The Echo people started coming in. So the main dude, Seth, who was Mark Echo's partner, basically co-owner, would just be like, this is what I want to see happen for Zoo. Like, go get Ryan Sheckler and put him on the team. He's got a TV show. These dudes aren't selling, but like conversations like that would happen, and you'd be like, yo, pump the brakes a little bit. Like, we have a strategy in place, and like, let us tap into the roots of Zoo York. Like, it never really, through like production issues, and like they never had like solid funding for the employees and budgets that they had. So I don't think Zoo ever got to reach its fullest potential in phase 1. So we were like Zoo 2.0, which was like getting all the OG Zoo dudes that were kind of burnt out and like just done dealing with the Echo people because they felt they just didn't get it. So like Pang and Rodney and a lot of those guys were like transitioning out as we were coming in. So we only had like a couple months with the OG Zoo dudes. And then it was like the second wave is like Barbier came in and all the aesthetics dudes came in, and then it was just like almost like a little chaos where the Echo dudes like just, it was wild. Like I went to work there because I didn't want it to be as like intimate as, for me, as Zero was, where you knew every team rider, everything. Like I was like, let me just work on something that's not part of my identity, my personal identity, and like I could treat it as a project or a job where it's like I show up, I work, like it's the decisions made aren't based on my personal preferences or my personality or my relationships. Like I'm kind of taking care of someone else's baby is kind of how I looked at it. Like I always respected Zoo. I thought like the videos were cool, the graphic, the imaging, the story, like just being East Coast based. I was like, all that shit is dope. Like it's a complete flip from what I did at Zero. So I was like, it's great, get your feet wet in skateboarding, but a whole nother realm of it, being East Coast based, which is right around the time I met you.
Yeah. Were you able to do that? Were you able to just treat it like a job and like somebody else's baby, or did you full on get in?
No, yeah. Full. It was different because I didn't have like almost everyone at Zero or everyone else I dealt with. I kind of dealt with like most of the Circa guys almost from like the flow stages. So I had a long rapport with them where like I didn't know Zared, for example. I did know Harold outside of like just meeting him a couple times through Alyasha when he came through San Diego. So it wasn't the same tight relationship with the riders or the staff. Like I was basically like, I got hired, like just show up like on Monday, like the new guy. I had talked to Rodney and Pang and those guys like prior to coming in, like just to check in, like, we have this opportunity, kind of how are things over there, but it wasn't, I didn't feel like I had the burden of any of those like team relationships or any of that on me. Is like my goal was to build the sales team, get them back into skate shops, help create a product flow, get the right number of boards in the line. Like I think they had 40 shapes in the line like when I got there. And I was like, we don't need 40 shapes. Just simplify. Like we didn't have one running graphic. So like we're gonna have a photo incentive board and it's gonna say Zoo York and it's gonna have the logo and we're gonna do it in a new color every season and white and black are always gonna be available. Just like simple things like that. So it's a really the only other time I've ever felt like I've had a guillotine on my neck is with that, like coming in there, they're like, all right, what do you think you deserve to get paid? And I was like, this is what I feel I earn. They're like, all right, you get paid that as long as, the plan we laid out together that you're a part of laying out, if we hit the numbers, you're good. If not, like the guillotine drops and you're out. So you're nowhere in skateboarding had I ever felt that type of pressure. And then you're also, every Monday morning, you're going into an executive meeting. So I'm reporting on Zoo York sales. Someone else is reporting on Echo sales. Someone else is reporting on G Unit sales. Complex magazines in there. So everyone under the umbrella. So we're like, we're, losing 13. Like I think the year I got there, they had lost like 13 million, and G Unit had sold like 13 million in T-shirts at the first Magic, right? So just like every Monday morning, I was just like, But in all fairness to them, it's also the only place I've ever worked where they're like, if you have $1 million idea and we give you $1 million and it comes to fruition, like the next time you ask for 2 million, 3 million, like marketing ideas, the money will be there. As long as they see a return on it, and that was with employees, with the riders. So if you needed a salesperson, like at the time, PacSun was huge. They had 800 stores, and like that was one of, like they didn't do business with Echo at PacSun, and at 800 doors, they're like, how do we get Zoo York in there? And they ended up letting us hire employees that knew how to manage that business. And like within a year, just PacSun sales alone like got us out of that, negative hole. So they're like, whatever you need. So it was different approach. Skate Maps was kind of going then. TV was still big. A lot of the people that did product placement for the other brands would start seeding in Zoo York. So it started cracking in urban, started cracking in department stores, mall stores. They did the thing with Ashton Kutcher, which was another big learning thing for me, right? I personally was like, that's going to be a brand killer, right? Like getting this dude to be the face of Zoo York. And at the time, they're like, we want to be in Macy's, we want to be in Nordstrom's, we want to be in all these things. And as VP of sales, I had to call all those people to make the appointments. And like no one was calling back. And like the day that Ashton thing dropped, like all those buyers were like, we will be in your showroom Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday. Tell us when you can see it. So it's like the first time I'd ever seen like the light switch from celebrity association with a brand.
How much did that, what kind of a lift did that bring to the brand?
It was like a shot of nitrous. It was like an atomic bomb went off. I'd never, at the time you got every Monday, maybe every other Monday, you got a stack of CDs with all the product placement from all the brands. So that's how they tracked impressions back then, prior to social media. Like when the Ashton thing came out, I shit you not, there was a stack of like every news station like in the country picked it up because they had the PR machine, you know, that got it out to everywhere. So the Zoo York logo was like on Punk'd, which, you know, Punk'd was like the biggest show at the time. So it was crazy. I'd still never seen anything like it, you know, but all the core skate guys, like the guy I came to work with was like, I don't want to do it. He ended up leaving because of the Ashton thing. And then obviously like all the skate dudes were like, this is corny. Like, you know, we respect the show and what the dude stands for, but no one wanted him to be the face of the brand, you know. But it worked, you know, and at that point I was like, man, I moved across the country. Like, this is what I'm here for. I'm here for new experiences, and, you know, it all worked out and everyone looked like a genius. So
it's almost like your time at like Earth brought you to alphanumeric, which then you kind of learned like that sort of outside apparel perspective. Then you went back to core skate, and then all of that stuff sort of came together over at Zoo York. Yeah. Which is pretty unbelievable.
Yeah. Which everything happens for a reason, and a lot of what brings me today is like all the different facets of people that you do business with, whether it's department store business, like there is a retail science to selling apparel and goods in a store. Like the department store people are like, this is how much square footage we have. This is how much space your product is taking up. It needs to sell X to warrant it being in this space. So a lot of that retail science I was able to bring back and have conversations with people at skate, surf, and snow shops. And it's like, hey, here's some way to think about this. So instead of having a wall full of grip tape, maybe stack the grip tape because a kid's gonna look through it anyways, and merchandise a higher ticket item. Like maybe make that all sweatshirts or make it all jackets or whatever. Just get people looking into how to merchandise their skate shops or just stores in general a little different. So that was part of my excitement about going into these other realms, is like, how do I make our beloved skate, surf, and snowboard shops better for the people that didn't ever work in an actual store or brand, and help them understand, like, when something go on sale, how much does it go on sale for? You know, how long does it stay on sale? And, you know, figure out pricing strategies and all that stuff. So yeah, it's like going to school 2 or 3 times over and over.
It feels like a pretty good segue into after Zoo York. That's when you started Univ, right?
Yeah. So Marcy, who's Mark Echo's twin sister, was the president of Zoo York. And she had just come back from maternity leave. And Marcy was like the in-between Seth, who was like, Seth was almost like, you ever seen Devil Wears Prada? You ever seen that movie? Anyway, he was the guy that would, like, someone would put the ads up for the year to kind of have a review of the theme, and he'd just come in and be like, dump water on his head. I'm bored. This doesn't excite me, and just walk out. Like, I'd never experienced anything like that. So Marcy was like the in-between between the Zoo York team, which was a lot of skatey dudes, and the Echo team, which was like the Garmento, the money side of like, we always had to pitch them to get the funds to do what we needed to do. So when Marcy was away at maternity leave, not a lot happened. So she had come back, and then she'd gotten pregnant with second child, and I was already flying back to California like every other week for PacSun meetings. So I was like, if she's not going to be in the office, I might as well just be on the West Coast because I can't get anything done. So we started Univ, and at the time, my partner, Tim Schwartz, was actually the surf marketing manager for Zoo York. So at the time, PacSun was a big surf, surf retailer. Like they did great with like Volcom. So we actually had a surf team, which was pretty cool, is we had like non-traditional, like most surf dudes at the time were like blonde haired, blue eyed. We had like Junjo from Hawaii who had the information brand and information stores. So full streetwear feel to all the people we lined up with, the Millen brothers, another cool, anyways, we got Univ, and the upstairs, the Univ was the West Coast Zoo York surf marketing office. And then downstairs we had the retail. So half the day I would spend upstairs in the Zoo York office, and then the other half I would spend down on the retail floor.
When did you transition fully out of Zoo York, and how was that transition?
Yeah, so that, I think we did that for like a year, and then Zoo York was, I think, just going to the licensing model. So they had like licensed footwear to Skechers, for example, which was an interesting one. And then I think Iconics came in, which was another big licensor. So they kind of started parceling out different segments of the business. And I was just like, I want to go focus on Univ. And at the time, we opened Univ for it to be a flagship for the Univ brand. So we ended up doing denim, tees, fleece, like cut and sew. And we had a friend, the same guy Gamez, who moved to California with Felix, had moved back to Miami and started a surf shop. So we converted that surf shop into Univ Miami. So we had Univ Encinitas in Miami. And then we were looking at a couple other spaces. And then that was like right around 2008, and the recession hit. And then it was like, pull everything in, simplify. Like, you know, at the same time, like I kind of had a personal goal where it's like, I want to have a distribution company. I want to do a shop. I want to do a brand. I kind of set all these personal goals of like, you know, owning some real estate that was the building that the distribution was run out of. So right around 2008, I had a kid, my first kid, Nico. The recession happened. Like we had a distribution, we had 2 stores, we had multiple brands we were distributing, and you know, I was like working what felt like 23 out of 24 hours. And like one day I was just, you know, lived a block away from the shop and walked by my favorite surf spot, and I just looked out and the waves were looking great, and I was like heavier than I'd ever been. Like only time in my life I've ever gained weight, and like hadn't surfed and was just stressed, and just kind of had like a come to Jesus moment where I'm like, what am I doing all this for? You know, I'm like, I'm stressed. Like, you know, your kid isn't sleeping, you're not sleeping. You know, the recession is hitting, like numbers are tough to meet, you know, rents, mortgages, you know, you have all these families you're taking care of. I was like, I just got to simplify my life. So now I look back at it as another one of those where I was like, at 30, I think I was at the time, or 32-ish, I was like, I just got to simplify, and like anything that's not serving a purpose, like just get rid of it. And like had a whole like business reset. I ended up selling my portion of the shop to Tim, my partner, and then I just had Robust Flavor, which was a design agency, so sales and marketing, but didn't own any of the brands and just worked freelance for like 2 years. Like we helped bring Action back the second time it came back when it was under the Circa umbrella. So we did that under our agency. And then it was tough, like getting the product right. And then one of the VPs, the early VPs at Planet Earth, this guy Jeff Moore, was now the president or vice president at Vans. And I ran into him surfing one day. He's like, "What are you up to?" And I told him, and he's like, "We're about to hire a key accounts person at Vans on the apparel side. So you basically deal with like PacSun, Zumi, like basically all the big box stores on the apparel side." He's like, "Oh, you should come in and interview for it." And at that time, I was like, "Ooh, I kind of want to get back in the game. I've done like a lot of entrepreneur stuff. Like, let me go see how the big boys work." Because, you know, at the time, Vans was, massive. So I ended up taking that job, and then that was like the forthcoming of going back to school, right? Like Vans was just another animal. And, you know, Vans being owned by VF, like you learn factories getting audited, how do you make product, how do you make SMUs, like, you know, how do you work at a publicly traded company that has to report, and, you know, you have to hit your numbers. And I worked there for a couple of years, and then was just like, if this is the end all be all, if I am at the greatest and biggest brand in the space, and I can only affect a certain amount of business, because being key accounts, like you're not doing marketing, you're not dealing with athletes, you're not, you know, you're not even talking to people at the shop level. Like you're basically going to the big box stores, opening your laptop, pulling up a spreadsheet, looking at what business you're anniversarying, what SMUs. There's not like a lot of, you have relationships with the buyer, but it's not like having boots on the ground and like hearing what's working at the store, and like people getting excited about product, and like touching a jean and be like, "Ah, you guys figure it," you know, like there's something about a buyer holding a product that you help create and them getting excited about it, where a lot of times you don't experience that. So I was like, let me regroup again, and how do I get back to doing something that's a little more intimate? And, you know, ultimately I worked on a couple other more projects. COVID hit, and then it's like, what am I going to do next? Opus was born. So there was Stray in there, but that's a long, short story.
You're at Vans, you kind of get to the biggest footwear brand, but you've also kind of like specialized. Obviously, key account sales. Before, you had done a lot of wearing a lot of different hats. And it sounds like once you got almost niche in your role, it got more boring. And is that fair to say?
It wasn't boring. It's just, it was different. Like
Yeah.
there's a lot of reporting. Like you spend a lot of time in spreadsheets. Like you're always, so every Saturday night, for example, you're preparing all the spreadsheets on your business. Like, has your business anniversary? What do your bookings look like? So every Monday morning, if your boss goes into a meeting and his boss has a question on business and key accounts, he needs to open that folder and have all the information in real time as possible in that era, right? So you're compiling all your sales data, all your projections, what's happening at the factories, what's getting made. So you spend a lot of time in spreadsheet land. So it's not about selling or creating product. A lot of it was about reporting. And you know, I ended up taking an Excel class because I wasn't that good at Excel, and it took me a long time to do it. But that's what you learn at Vans, is like they take the best possible people from a cultural fit and then give them the tools. Like if you're bad at public speaking, they'll pay for you to go to public speaking class. If you don't know Excel, like you could go get an Excel tutor. Like any way you want to better yourself, like they will give you the resources to do your job better, which I thought was pretty cool. So it wasn't boring, but it wasn't exciting. Like there was plenty to do, and there was never a day where, you know, there wasn't something to do, but you also didn't feel like you could truly affect business, where if you wear multiple hats, you may be able to like get a new team rider on, create a new product. You know, you kind of had boundaries, because if you wanted to make a product, you'd have to have a factory already online. So I did the backpack business, for example, and our backpack manufacturer went offline for whatever reason. They couldn't deliver bags for that particular year. Like, you still had to make up that business. Like, that $5 million in backpack business didn't go away. It didn't go off the books. It was like you had to sell more socks or more tees. And, so if you move that $5 million into socks, and then the sock vendor went offline, now you're trying to find $10 million worth of business with 2 of your categories gone, right? And that creates, like, in any other brand, I could have been like, well, do a limited edition denim or whatever. It didn't work like that here. So you were constantly challenged with, and in hindsight, maybe I didn't know all the best procedures to maybe get around that. So I was just like, this is crazy. Like, I'd rather go be able to affect business across multiple categories, stay working with all the people I've built relationships with, and be able to take more people along for the ride. Like, so do more for the athletes we work with, skaters, surfers, snowboarders, whatever it may be. At that time, it's automotive people, bike ride, like the scope of people I dealt with at that end was like a pretty broad spectrum of people. And I wanted to keep working in all those fields because it's exciting to go to like a music venue one night, a skate park thing, and a movie premiere that you worked on, and all that stuff keeps life exciting, versus like, oh, let me go talk about, ankle socks for, 9 people.
So you're basically in this role that we'll just say not boring, but maybe not fulfilling in the way that some of those other roles had been in the past. You have a stint doing Stray, and then you start Opus.
Yeah, so I was at Stray, and again, like Jamie and Muska, Nico was also involved, my roommate, and the guy that brought me to Circa. So that was like the connection to the crew that did that. And just before, so we're all minority owners, and Angel was the main owner. We all sold our shares back to Angel, and then Angel sold it to another company. And this happened, like, I think the deal closed like maybe a month before COVID hit. And as part of the due diligence process, which took like 6 months, and the guys that bought it were like, they're yachting in Boca on the weekends, and the Stray team was like in a dingy 2-story building on Fairfax, right? And it's like oil and water between us. And when COVID happened, they do like Champion Footwear, they're a massive licensing business, BBC. So Stray was like there for the time, non-licensed businesses, like the first brand they bought because they wanted to own something. So when COVID hit and they're getting 50, 100 million in cancellations across all brands, they're like, oh, we're going to put a Stray on ice for a little bit. And I was like, who knows what's going to happen with COVID? Like, I want to get out and do my own thing. So I kind of started putting the feelers out, like who's available, who wants to do something. And then at the end of COVID, it was like no one wanted to work in an office anymore. Like, everyone was like, I'll do freelance. It allowed me to start a brand with like some production people in China, a designer in LA, a marketing guy in New York. And, we all came together with ideas over the course of a couple months and knocked out the designs. And Denny's, who does all the design work, worked at Huff, and the factory that built Huff had been building Globe and Lakai for years. So like all the tooling, all the great suedes, all the basic ingredients to build a good shoe were already there. So it was like one of the first times that I didn't have to go spend like weeks or months at a factory and building something, because all the first samples came back like, man, this is almost too good to be true. So because of all those things being in place and all the experience that everyone working on the project had, it allowed us to build, brand in say 6 months, what historically would have taken like a year and a half.
Why on earth did you want to start a core skateboarding footwear brand in a time when you have these huge, we'll call them athletic brands, kind of running the show in skateboarding? Like, why, having seen all of the core brands continue to get less and less shelf space, what made you go, I'm going to jump in there anyway and do this? What was your reasoning?
So, being in so many skate shops, like intimate with knowing most of the buyers of skate shops for 10, 15 years, or 20 plus for some guys across the US. Like, I've had a lot of conversations with people, and even in my Univ days, like, we carried SB, we carried Vans, we carried New Balance, we carried all the big athletic brands, and knowing what the burden is of like having to take a Nike delivery and then a Vans delivery, and like just the financial toll it took taking all those seasonal drops. Where when I started Opus, I was like, one, I realized a lot of shop owners aren't great pre-bookers. Like, no one has a crystal ball, like especially in skate, which is so fickle. So what made me excited about launching a skate footwear brand is like, I'm gonna make simple colorways and simple designs that aren't by any means challenging the design quo. Like, I'm gonna take 5 SKUs that look familiar, like I love slip-ons. How do we make a classic slip-on, not just from who we think of as this slip-on creator, but take our 3 favorite slip-ons from 3 of our favorite brands and create a hybrid of it that we felt made a better version of what was out there. And now that shop doesn't have to buy 32 pairs of that slip-on. They could buy, it's all open inventory. So if they need 3 pairs, they could buy 3 pairs. And we keep them in stock year round. So I felt for all the people that were now out a size 10 from all the big core footwear brands, now they can almost order it like an at-once hard goods, which they're used to doing. Like, most people are like, oh, it's Wednesday, I need grip tape for the weekend. I better order grip tape, so it's here for the weekend. Opus was created so those core doors can react to their business and have a steady flow of the key sizes they needed when they need it without having to wait for a seasonal drop. So that's why I felt we could offer the skate shop something different. And then we also dealt with Zoomies, which, helps. You get to hit your minimums. Obviously, you get paid. And I actually drove across the US and mapped out all the core skate doors in relation to every Zoomies store. So if you tell me or ask me, Zoomies door 99, which core skate shop it would affect, I could go to Zoomies and be like, hey, can we not put shoes in store 99 because this core skate shop I've been working with for 20 years, I'd love for them to get a head start. And they'd be like, we'll honor that. It's great. The better that core skate door does with a brand, the more it helps the brand, the more it helps the brand, the more it's popular throughout all of our doors. So they were actually very understanding of like the core skate door strategy, which everyone kind of thinks of them as the evil empire, but most of the people that work there, like from the skateboard footwear side, grew up in skate shops. So they're pretty intimate with how they're perceived. And, when they get to sign off on something like that, they're like, we're contributing to the, healthiness of the skate community. So it's pretty cool.
Shout out to all the guys over at Zoomies that actually rip, because there's a lot of guys in the office that totally rip.
I've seen some lunchtime demos there where I'm like, you could sell tickets to this.
It's pretty shocking. But so you approach this with like a totally different mindset going into it of the way that you were selling it, and then you're also doing that even with like the team and trying to sort of support community, right?
Yeah, so the first season of Opus, I was like, I want to try and have 100% of the people working on Opus skate, all the way from the guy printing the t-shirts to who made, like, I made the stickers with Jim Gray, for example. Like, I was like, as many people of all, like, the people I banked with, the lawyer that did the trademarking, like, everyone I tried to keep skatey, which I came to learn that's a very hard task. But yeah, the idea was like, how do we make the skate community stronger? So I wanted to be mindful of like, who's shooting the photos? Like, if we could actually pay a photographer to shoot 4 guys across 4 different projects, and that photographer has a steady stream of income, it keeps him in the street, not just shooting the Opus guys, but other guys, and hopefully he can make a living out of being a photographer or a videographer, which is tough. So we try to be mindful of like, who's shooting, who's filming, where we use that stuff, how we get that imaging to the shop. So hopefully the skater and everyone else involved in creating the content can get a reliable check, which can be challenging for all involved. You know, there's getting the assets to the shop, getting the shop to use the assets, not just ours, but, you know, your background in what it is, you know, how challenging it could be to get a shop to use assets generated by the company. So all of our learnings and dealings are like, how do we make the team experience better? How do we make the experience for the shop dealing with us better? How can we create more of a foundation and a community so more people can stay within skateboarding and earn a living in skateboarding? So all the way down to someone like Swampy riding for Opus and Heroin, and like the boards he's riding and the content he's creating. It's not street league. It's, you know, he's not winning any contests. He's not getting any trophies, but he's creating and skating these boards that are a whole new realm. Like, you open Swampy's trunk and he's got 7 different boards in 7 different shapes. And to me, that's 7 different experiences. Like, each one of those boards riding the same quarter pipe or the same curb or the same park feel completely different. And I was like, that's a cool story to introduce to not only the skate shop, but people that may not view skating as having a quiver of boards, which I thought was pretty cool, or still think it's cool.
It's very cool. I just skated one of those, the watermelon, the other day, and it was like a shockingly fun experience. I think what Foss and the gang are doing over at Heroin is incredible, and they're having so much fun with it, and it's cool to see them, even just through like DMs and comments on YouTube, like, that fun that they're having is genuinely infectious. And the amount of people that are, you know, I'll say 35 and above and way above, that are sort of taking that and having a good time with it is amazing. Because as you get older, your body breaks down a little bit and it makes skating harder. So if you can continue to have fun with it as the years go on, I mean, that's a really magic thing.
Yeah. Well, I sent you Fakey Cowgirl's Instagram, Terry. Like, he was just at the food court contest in Buffalo with us, and like stepping on his board. Like, you know, he has an Arsenal, but I'm like, how? Like, it's magic carpet. Like, you know, it's like, I used to bug out on Simon Woodstock being able to kickflip the skimboard, but like the stuff Terry does on his boards, it's wild. Like, never in my wildest dreams could I imagine doing that stuff on those boards. He's something special. Super fun to watch.
There's a lot of people doing magical things right now in skateboarding, and it's genuinely fun. So for anybody out there who's, you know, maybe they're new to Opus, what would you say, like, if you were going to hang your hat on something and be like, this is who Opus is for, or this is, you know, what Opus is about, what would you tell that person at home?
Well, it's different people find different value in the brand, right? Like, I could talk about core skate shop distribution, but for a kid coming into the shop for the first time, he doesn't care if it's skater owned and skater operated, right? So I'd say we hang our hat the most on like creating a comfortable skatable shoe that lasts at a fair price point, right? Like we're one of the few shoes that are under $80 right now that last, great insole. So I would say we make a great shoe at a very fair price. If you're into distribution, who we do or don't sell to from a shop level, I say we're a brand you could get behind because you're going to be one of very limited people that actually sell it. So if you have a comparable athletic brand in your store, you may be competing with 25 other non-skate shops to sell the same version of a shoe you're selling. That doesn't happen with us. The brand means different things to different people, but at the end of the day, we want to work with cool people doing good projects in the right spirit, and that will hopefully transcend when you jump onto the Instagram or social, Opus Social, or you meet someone in public that's affiliated with a brand, whether it's a salesperson, whether it's someone that rides or works with us, you will get a feeling of like, man, these are good people doing good things that care about this community of skate, snow, surf, all things that kind of build off the foundation of skating that we've been involved in for 30 plus years. That's what I hope, and that's the people we work with. That's the spirit that we want them to carry, from the flow guy to the top design people or production people that work with us.
That's awesome. It just seems like in all of your years of experience, all culminating into this one brand that you're just like, be it sales, marketing, team, distribution, and then obviously product itself. You've got so much behind it, and it's just really cool. What, of all of the years of experience that you have, all the years of experience, because you've obviously, it's like you said, you went to this university with Planet Earth, you went to this university with Blackbox and Alphanumeric and Zoo York. If you could give somebody at home advice that is maybe on the beginning of their career, what would you tell them?
The best advice I could give someone is to show up. If there's a demo, go. If there's an event, go. If there's a skate park, a skate shop, if you have the opportunity to travel, get entrenched in what you want to be a part of. A lot of people will ask, how do I get involved in the industry? And it's participate. If you want to be in the skateboard industry, go to skate parks, find a project you're passionate about. What facet of the industry do you want to be in? For me personally, I always wanted to travel and skate with my friends. Had I known there was marketing roles or TM roles or regional sales rep roles, I didn't realize there's so many ways you could reach that objective outside of being a sponsored or a pro skater. So there's a ton of jobs or roles within the skateboard industry that you don't have to be a pro skater to do. So asking yourself, what do I really want to do? And then finding a job or creating a job or becoming a part of a brand that needs the role that you want to fill. A piece of advice would be go be a part of the community, learn, understand, and build relationships, and the opportunities will come when you put yourself in the right place. And then give yourself the tools to understand what that role encompasses. I didn't understand manufacturing early on, but I was who do I learn from? And I was always fascinated about why is Ford made in Mexico or Brazil or all these places? And then prior to the internet, you could read books and magazines about car manufacturing and why they do it in particular countries and not others. And you can now, having Google, you can find anything. Chat GPT, spit out a resume spit out 10 things I need to do to become well-versed in this industry, and you could have your roadmap right there.
What about taking a look back on your own personal journey? If you were going to give yourself one piece of advice, what would it be? You're talking to younger Mirko right now.
So going back to the Planet Earth days, I would have told myself to learn everything I could from the K2 merger or acquisition of Planet Earth, right? Because you have all this brain power, you have a publicly traded company. I didn't go to school, so understanding financial and business literacy on that level would have been another. I learned later in business life what I could have learned in that opportunity. So the advice to myself was like, drop the ego and the emotion of being tied to a rollerblade company and stick around and learn. Which the funny part is, years later, I ended up giving shoes to people at Rollerblade magazines so I could call them and find out where the rails and the hubbas were in the magazines. So eventually, I got right back into what I was trying to avoid. And with that, I realized, like, whether you're skating, surfing, rollerblading, if like you're passionate about what you do, those are the kind of people I want to be around. And as I got older and less caught up in my own ego, I came to realize that, like, the people that play soccer or into cycling or into ultra running, like, people are into the activity that they're into, but there's a passion that runs in it that's comparable to our passion for skateboarding, right? Like, you can interchange the activities. And Dan Stewart once came up to a bunch of us sitting on a curb talking. He's like, "You guys are skate jocks." And we all took offense to it. And we're like, "What?" And he's like, "Jocks, all they talk about is football. All they think about is football. You guys are skate jocks. All you think about is skating. All you talk about is skating. Everything you do revolves around skating. You're skate jocks." And he just rolled off. And like, at the time, it didn't make sense. But years later, after experiencing all these people in different facets of life, I was like, man, he's right. Like, the activity is interchangeable, although skateboarders do look at architecture and every crack and every texture way different than people of other sports. And there are a lot of more unique items to it, but the passion people feel for the activity or sport or lifestyle they're a part of is like contagious. And you're like, man, I want a piece of that, you know. The other thing I would tell myself is find joy in watching a kid drop in for the first time. And if you could tap into that person's joy, like, you can relive your best moments in skateboarding almost every time you go to a park. Like, when you go to a park and kid puts their board up to drop in for the first time, you realize, like, everyone stops to watch. And it isn't just to see the kid potentially slam. It's because we all know that feeling that when you make it to the bottom of the transition and you made that first drop in, like, that feeling is rarely ever replicated again. So if you can find that same joy for that kid dropping in as you did yourself dropping in, like, the magic never goes away. The battery gets recharged quite often and you get to tap into that feeling. And if you could do that, like, I surf quite often, and like, watching someone go down the line or drop in or make it to their feet for the first time, and you realize, like, that's the first step of their long journey. It's a pretty cool thing to tap into. It's special. Like, watching someone beam, like, it's a great feeling. If you could bottle it up.
Then you'd be a millionaire. Yeah. Then you'd make all the money.
Yeah, there's something special about it, you know. My last kind of, man, I wish I could bottle it up, was the Washington Street Skate Park anniversary. It, like, been a while since I've been to an event like that, and just kind of reminded me of that, like, on the edge of chaos where there's just people flying. It's like controlled chaos. Like, sometimes just watching someone take a line, pump through a corner a certain way while dodging someone at Mach 0, and them not batting an eye. Like, it's poetry. There's beauty in it, and like, it doesn't even have to be a trick, you know. There's something special, and if you can get people to tap into that, everyone would understand the greatness that skateboarding has to offer. And like, it's changed my life and why I continue to do this after all these years and try and make the industry better and people's experiences better, because I do believe it saves lives and changes lives for the better. Like, we're 20 plus years friendship, and I'm sure you have another 100 people that you share the same thing with. Like, there's something special and magical about it. It's not quite the fountain of youth, because we're both talking about insults before this conversation, but it is something special.
But it's as close as you can get.
Yeah,
I'm
convinced. I'm convinced.
Well, thank you so much, Mirko. That was a wonderful conversation.
We're under 4 hours?
Yeah, we're under 4 hours. Yeah, gang, thanks so much for tuning in. I appreciate it, and please let me know in the comments below who you want to have on next.
You.